The snow falls silent. The snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, coating the Montana wilderness in a cold, suffocating silence. Wind howled through the towering pines like a pack of ghosts, and the cold clawed through the layers of wool and leather, as if it were alive. Huddled together for warmth, 5 women sat in the wreckage of an overturned wagon, their eyes reflecting fear, exhaustion, and something unspoken, something darker. Maribel, the eldest at 32, tried to keep them calm. Her blonde hair was matted with snow, and her hands trembled as she adjusted the thin blanket around the youngest, 16-year-old Clara. Clara was feverish, shivering violently as the cold seeped deeper into her bones. "We can't stay here," whispered Ruth, her voice hoarse. "We'll freeze to death if we don't move." Maribel shook her head. "We can't drag Clara through this snow. She won't survive." "We won't either," said Naomi bitterly, pacing in tight circles near the edge of the wagon. "They left us here to die, and you know it." The truth hung heavy in the air. A group of settlers they'd traveled with had deemed the women a burden and, without warning, left them behind 2 nights ago. Supplies were scarce. The weather was turning. Decisions had been made in the dark, and the women had been deemed disposable. Anna, the quietest of the 5, finally spoke. "We should have never trusted them. We thought they were our salvation. They were just cowards." The fire had gone out hours ago, and now the cold wrapped around them like death. Maribel looked up at the dark sky and felt a sharp pain in her chest, not just from the cold, but from the weight of her own secret. She wasn't ready to die, not before she faced what she had run from. But maybe this was what she deserved. Suddenly, Naomi froze, holding up a hand. "Did you hear that?" At first, they heard nothing but wind. Then hoofbeats, faint but growing louder. Panic surged. "Hide," Maribel hissed. They scrambled into the broken wagon, crouching behind barrels and crates. Clara whimpered softly, as Ruth covered her mouth to keep her quiet. Then came the voices, foreign, low, and strong. A group of riders emerged through the trees, their horses snorting steam in the cold. They were Lakota. The women held their breath. Stories had been told among settlers, stories meant to incite fear. Tales of scalping and slaughter. But as the Lakota dismounted and approached the wreck, their expressions were not cruel or mocking. They looked curious, concerned. One of them, tall and sharp-eyed, stepped forward and called out in broken English, "You hurt?" No one moved. Maribel slowly emerged, hands raised in surrender, her voice barely audible. "Please, the girl. She's sick. We need help." The man looked at Clara, his brow furrowing. He barked something in Lakota to the others. They moved quickly. Blankets, hot stones. A pouch of herbsol appeared, as if by magic. The women watched in stunned silence as their rescuers worked with calm urgency. A young Lakota woman appeared from the trees, her gentle hands checking Clara's pulse and murmuring something soothing. Anna wept quietly. "Why are they helping us?" Maribel couldn't answer. She only knew that death had come close and then passed them by. As the Lakota prepared to transport them, Naomi resisted. "We don't even know where they're taking us." "We don't have a choice," Maribel replied, her voice firm. "And maybe this is our second chance." Clara was gently lifted onto a horse, swaddled in warmth. One by one, the women mounted behind the Lakota warriors. As they rode into the forest, away from the broken wagon and the haunting silence of the snow, Maribel looked over her shoulder. That frozen place held the last of their old lives and the secrets they thought they'd buried. But secrets, like ghosts, never stay buried for long. Into the Lakota camp the journey through the snow-covered forest was slow and silent. Pine branches sagged with heavy snow, brushing softly against the shoulders of the riders as they passed. The Lakota men guided their horses with quiet confidence, barely speaking. The 5 women rode close behind them, chilled to the bone, yet too stunned to protest. Maribel rode behind the same tall Lakota man who had first spoken to them, Chayton. They later learned his name meant Falcon. His back was broad and warm through the thick fur cloak he wore. She clung to the saddle, shivering, not only from the cold but from uncertainty. Who were these people really? And what did they want? Ahead, the forest opened to a hidden valley. Cradled between hills, smoke curled gently from teepees clustered near a frozen stream. Children and women gathered as the group approached, their faces curious, cautious. Anna whispered, "I didn't know people still lived like this." "They don't live like us," Ruth replied under her breath. "They live better. Together." They dismounted near the edge of the camp, where a large fire crackled, giving off much-needed heat. Several Lakota women approached and helped them down from the horses. Clara was carried to a nearby shelter, where a healer waited with herbs and warm furs. The young girl's face was pale, lips blue, but she clung to life. The other 4 women stood awkwardly by the fire, trying to warm their stiff limbs. No one had said much to them yet. Though the eyes watching them weren't hostile, only watchful, Chaitan returned and gestured for them to follow. Food warmth come inside. A large buffalo hide lodge. The smell of meat stew filled the air. Flatbread, roasted roots, and dried berries were placed before them. Naomi hesitated before reaching for food, her pride cracking slightly. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Ruth nudged her. Eat, we owe them our lives. As they ate, Chaitan sat nearby with a few elders. Though most of the conversation happened in Lakota, the women caught bits and pieces. Occasionally, he translated. You not safe in wild, Chaitan said. More snow coming, you stay here. How long? Anna asked. As long as needed. Maribel looked around at her companions. Anna's eyes were filled with quiet relief. Naomi still held suspicion in her jaw, and Ruth seemed to be calculating something. They weren't used to kindness after what they'd been through. Later that night, they were each shown to a small tent near the main fire, with buffalo robes and pine branches for bedding. Clara remained with the healer. As Maribel settled into the warm tent, sleep refused to come. She stared at the ceiling. The sound of wind replaced now by the faint beating of drums in the distance. Her mind raced back to what had led her here. She remembered the screams in the night, the blood on the floor, the desperate escape. The lies she told to get onto that wagon train. No one in the group had asked questions, not even the women she now lay beside. They each had their own past, their own sins. She sat up slowly, eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through the hide walls. Across from her, Ruth stirred. You awake? Ruth whispered, double quotes. Yes, Maribel said softly. I saw what was in your bag, Ruth added after a pause. The locket. The initials inside. That's not your name. Maribel's heart froze. We're all hiding something, Maribel. But out here, there's no place left to run. Maribel didn't respond. She lay back down, pulling the fur tighter around her. Outside, the drums stopped. A wolf howled somewhere in the hills. The stars burned cold and far above them, and in the quiet, 5 women each, bearing a secret they thought would never surface, were slowly being drawn back to the truth they tried to escape. The Lakota had saved their bodies, but only time would tell if they could survive the reckoning of their souls. The secrets beneath the snow morning broke with a pale glow, the sky painted in hues of blue and silver. The Lakota camp stirred quietly, smoke rising from fire pits as the day began. Children chased one another in the snow while women gathered water from the stream, their movements graceful. Practiced inside the women's tent, Maribel woke to find Naomi already outside, pacing near the fire. Ruth sat cross-legged, sharpening a piece of wood into a crude knife. Anna was still asleep, curled under buffalo hides, her face peaceful for the first time in days. There was no sign of Clara. I'm going to check on her, Maribel said, slipping on her boots. Ruth gave a nod. Tell me if she's worse. Maribel made her way to the healer's lodge. Inside, the warm scent of cedar and herbs filled the air. Clara lay beneath thick blankets, her face no longer deathly pale, though her breathing was shallow. A Lakota woman sat beside her, humming softly as she crushed dried leaves into a bowl. She lived, Chaitan's voice said behind her. Maribel turned to see him standing just outside the flap, his face unreadable. She's strong, he added, but fever takes time. Maribel nodded, unsure what to say. She had spent her life surrounded by men who only saw women as burdens or possessions. Chaitan was different. He spoke little, observed much. She didn't trust easily, but something about him unsettled her because it didn't feel like danger. Back at the fire, Naomi had started questioning the Lakota villagers, where they came from, how long they would let the women stay, what they expected in return. Her tone was laced with suspicion, and several villagers kept their distance. What are you trying to do? Anna asked, approaching with arms crossed. I want to know the terms, Naomi replied. No one gives something for nothing. We're not prisoners, Anna snapped. You sure about that? Naomi shot back. You know what settlers say about these people. Settlers also said we'd be safe with them, Ruth cut in, and they left us to die. The argument swelled until a deep, commanding voice cut through the air. It was an elder, one of the Lakota councilmen. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp as flint. Chayton, translated beside him. You bring fear with you. And secrets. They poison the wind. The women fell silent. You are safe here, Chayton added. But not forever. Healing takes more than fire and food. You must choose what you carry, and what you bury. Naomi folded her arms but said nothing more. That afternoon, Ruth disappeared into the woods with a small hunting party. She moved with confidence, her past life as a trapper's daughter finally useful. Anna helped with food preparation, learning from the Lakota women who welcomed her quiet presence. Maribel wandered near the stream. Alone, she reached into her coat and pulled out the locket Ruth had mentioned. Inside were 2 miniature portraits, of a man with kind eyes, the other of a young girl with soft curls. She closed it quickly and shoved it back into her coat. She couldn't afford to think of them. Not yet. Not until she knew the others would never find out the truth of what she'd done, what she'd become. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind her. She turned to find Chayton watching her from across the stream. Neither of them spoke. You're not just running from the cold, he finally said. Maribel's throat tightened. You don't know me, he nodded slowly. But I know running. Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with the truth pressed heavy against her chest. Back in camp, night fell quickly. The fire crackled, and stories were told in Lakota tales of great hunts, of spirits that roamed the mountains, of ancestors who watched over them. The women listened quietly, each one feeling, for the first time in weeks, like maybe they weren't just survivors. Maybe they still had something left to fight for. But as the stars appeared, so, too did the weight of what they'd left behind, because the past never forgets, and soon it would come knocking. Echoes of the past. The days passed slowly, marked by fresh snowfalls and the steady rhythm of camp life. Clara's fever began to break, thanks to the Lakota healer's care. Her voice returned, soft but steady, and she clung to Maribel like a frightened child, though she never spoke of what had happened before the wagon was abandoned. The other women found tasks to occupy their hands and minds. Ruth helped with gathering firewood. Anna learned how to sew leather with sinew, watching the Lakota women with quiet admiration. Naomi remained restless, her eyes always on the horizon, as though expecting trouble to appear at any moment. But beneath their daily activities, the secrets they carried stirred like wolves in the dark. One evening, as a soft snow drifted across the camp, Chayton gathered the women around the main fire. He passed them bowls of soup and sat in silence for a while before speaking. Soon, winter storms will close the passes. No one leaves or comes. The message was clear. If they wanted to leave the valley before spring, it had to be soon. Anna looked up. Where would we even go? Maribel's voice was flat. Back to what we ran from. No, Ruth said. We go forward, somewhere new. Naomi scoffed. You say that like we have a choice. But you all know what waits for us. What we did, what we left behind. Clara looked down at her hands. The shadows flickering across her face revealed more than her words ever could. That night, Maribel couldn't sleep. She wandered out toward the stream again, clutching the locket hidden beneath her shawl. She opened it and stared at the faces inside. Her daughter's name was Lily. Her husband, Thomas. She had run not because she was afraid for herself, but because the fire that had destroyed their home wasn't an accident. It was set by her own hands. She hadn't meant for the fire to spread so far. But when it did, and Thomas never made it out, she ran. Lily had already been gone, taken by illness the winter before. The grief had twisted into something hollow and wild inside her. She snapped the locket shut and pressed it to her lips, a silent apology. But how could she forgive herself? Footsteps approached softly. It was Ruth. You should tell them, Ruth said. Maribelle flinched. What? The others, Clara, Anna, even Naomi. We all carry something, but if we keep pretending we're not broken, we'll never heal. Maribel stared into the frozen stream. You first, then. Ruth sighed. My secret's simple. I married the wrong man. He beat me, and I took his rifle and left him in the snow. Thought I could live with that. Thought I had too. There was no judgment in her voice, only fatigue. Maribel nodded slowly. The next day, they were asked to participate in a cleansing ceremony. The Lakota called it Inepi, the sweat lodge. Chayton explained it was for healing, for letting go. Inside the small, dome-shaped structure, stones heated in fire were brought in and placed in a pit. Water was poured over them, steam rising thick and hot. The air grew stifling. The dark absolute. In the shadows, the women sat shoulder to shoulder. Each time the flap opened to let in more stones, prayers were whispered in Lakota. The drumbeat echoed like a heartbeat, steady and deep. Then the silence opened like a wound. I lied about my name, Anna said softly. My father was a preacher, but he was not holy. I ran because no one believed me. Clara's voice cracked. The man who abandoned us on the wagon train. He said he'd marry me. He lied. He just wanted to use me. Ruth exhaled deeply. Naomi hesitated before speaking. I stole money from my employer, enough to start over. But they were looking for me. I joined the wagon train to disappear. And then, slowly Maribel spoke. I lost my child to fever. Then, I set a fire to our home. I wanted it to end, but it didn't. My husband died in that fire. No one spoke. No one judged. The heat wrapped around them, and something else, something heavy, lifted in the darkness. They weren't alone anymore. They were broken, yes, but not beyond repair. Outside, the wind howled over the mountains. But inside the sweat lodge, 5 women found the first flicker of peace. Flames at the edge of the valley. The cleansing ceremony changed something. After weeks of silence, secrets, and suspicion, the 5 women now looked at each other with new eyes. Not just as survivors or strangers, but as sisters bound by truth. The pain they carried had not vanished, but the act of naming it aloud had loosened its grip. Clara smiled for the first time since they'd met her. Ruth laughed at a child's joke by the fire. Naomi stopped pacing and started helping build storage huts for winter supplies. And Anna, who had flinched at every touch, now sat with the elder women weaving beads into her shawl. Maribel watched them all, wondering how long this fragile peace could last. But peace, like the snow, never stayed untouched for long. It was 3 days after the ceremony when the lookout on the ridge returned with urgency in his voice. He spoke in Lakota, rapid and tense. Chayton's jaw tightened as he listened. Maribel saw the change in him, and approached. What is it? He turned to her, his eyes unreadable. There are riders. Settlers? A small group, 2 days from here. Her stomach turned cold. Are they searching? They follow tracks. Wagon prints, maybe looking for you. She felt her breath leave her. It could be coincidence or it could be vengeance. Chayton met with the elders. A decision had to be made. Hide the women, move the camp, or confront whoever was coming. Maribel gathered the others. Someone's coming, she told them, her voice low. Settlers. Could be from the wagon train? They came back. Clara's face went pale. Maybe, Naomi said, or maybe they're bounty hunters. If they heard about my theft. Ruth looked around. What do? We tell the truth, Anna said, surprising everyone. To the Lakota, to each other. We've come too far to run again. That night, the 5 women met with the elders, with Chayton translating. They spoke clearly, bravely, confessing not just what they had done, but what might come of it. Chayton listened to each story, his voice steady but his eyes flickering with something deeper: respect, maybe, or sorrow. When they finished, the eldest among the Lakota stood. He was thin, his face lined by age and wisdom. You have walked through fire, he said, and now the fire follows you. He looked to the others. We will not send you away, but we will not fight your enemies. You must face them. Chayton stepped forward. I will go with them. The elder nodded. So be it. The next morning, the camp prepared. The women were given warm clothing, bows, and small blades not for war, but for survival. They would leave at dawn to meet the riders before they reached the valley. Maribel spent her last moments near the stream. She opened the locket one last time and whispered her daughter's name into the wind. I'm not running anymore, she said. When the time came, the 5 women and Chayton rode out together. The sky was steel gray, the trees silent beneath, a new dusting of snow. They moved swiftly through the forest, hearts pounding, the weight of their pasts pressing harder with every hoofbeat. By late afternoon, they spotted smoke in the distance, campfire smoke, curling against the sky. They dismounted and moved on foot, crouching through the brush. From behind a rise, they saw them, 5 men, rough-armed. One of them was Caleb, the wagon master, who had abandoned them weeks ago. Clara gasped and sank behind a tree. Naomi's voice was low. That's him, the one who promised her marriage. He's also the one who took my satchel, Anna said. The one with my mother's letters. Ruth gritted her teeth. They didn't come to rescue us. They came to bury us. Maribel looked at Chayton. You said we must face them. Then we do it now. They stepped from the trees, 6 figures against the snow. Caleb's face twisted, in shock. Well, I'll be damned. Ghosts in the woods. We're not ghosts, Maribel said, her voice steady. We're the ones you left to die. He reached for his rifle, but Chayton was faster, his bow drawn, arrow aimed. Don't, Chayton said. You won't get a second chance. Caleb froze. The air between them was heavy with everything unspoken betrayal, anger, fear. This wasn't just a meeting, it was Judgment Day. Reckoning, in the snow, the clearing was still, holding its breath. The tension between the two groups could have split the frozen air like glass. 6 stood on one side, 5 women, and a Lakota warrior facing down the men who had abandoned them to die. Caleb lowered his rifle. Slowly, his eyes scanned the women, lingering with surprise on Clara. Didn't expect you to be alive. Girl, you were barely breathing when we left. Chayton stepped forward, bow still drawn. Say one more word, and you won't speak again. Caleb sneered but didn't move. What do you want? He asked Maribel. Revenge? No, she replied. We want answers, and we want what's ours. Anna stepped forward. My satchel. The one you stole when you pushed me off the wagon. It has my letters, my mother's cross. Give it back. Caleb glanced over his shoulder at the other men. One of them, a short, grimy-faced man named Otis, grumbled and pulled a leather bag from under a tarp. He tossed it toward Anna, who caught it with shaking hands. Clara's voice rang out next. You said you loved me, said you'd marry me. Then you left me like garbage in the snow. Caleb actually laughed. You were naive. Thought a man like me would marry a kid like you. Please. Before anyone could react, Chayton's arrow shot past Caleb's face, grazing his cheek. I will not miss next time. He warned. Naomi stepped forward now, her eyes blazing. You all made choices. You could have helped us. You chose to leave us, and now we're giving you one chance to walk away. Leave this valley. Never come back. The men laughed, but there was an edge of fear in it. Caleb tried to bluff. There's 5 of us and only 6 of you. You left us to die once, Ruth said, her voice cold. But we didn't. We learned how to survive. And now you'll learn what we became. Naomi took a step closer. You want a fight, Caleb? We'll give you one, but just remember you're the ones who came looking for ghosts. Silence. Then one of the men, an older settler with gray in his beard, tossed down his rifle. This isn't worth it, he said. They're right. We left them. That's on us. Another man followed. Then a third. Only Otis and Caleb remained. Caleb spat on the snow. Cowards. Otis hesitated, then turned and followed the others into the woods. Muttering now, it was just Caleb. You never were strong enough to finish what you started, Maribel said. I should have left you tied to that wagon, he hissed. And I should have lit it on fire. She snapped back. He reached again for his rifle too, slowly, with a single movement. Ruth knocked it from his grip. He stumbled, fell to one knee. Chayton stood over him. Go, he said, before the snow buries you for good. Caleb scrambled to his feet, hatred burning in his eyes, and fled into the trees. The women stood in the clearing. Breath heavy, hearts pounding. Anna clutched her satchel to her chest. Clara wiped her tears with a trembling hand. Naomi looked shaken, but victorious. Ruth stared at the horizon as if seeing it clearly for the first time. Maribel turned to Chayton. Thank you. He nodded. You did not need saving this time. No, she said, a slow smile tugging at her lips. We didn't. The group made their way back through the forest, the light beginning to dim as dusk fell over the snow. They didn't speak much during the return. They didn't have to. For the first time since their journey began, they didn't feel like fugitives or victims. They were something else. Now, something stronger. And though the path ahead was uncertain, they no longer feared what lay behind. They had faced the ghosts of their past and sent them running. A new path forward, the valley welcomed them back with silence. As they rode into camp, Lakota children ran to greet them, wide-eyed and smiling, sensing something had changed. The women were no longer shadows of the ones who had arrived weeks ago, half-dead and frozen. They were different, now scarred, yes, but whole. Chayton dismounted first and spoke quietly to the elders, who nodded with solemn approval. Word of the encounter with the settlers spread quickly, but no one asked for details. In Lakota tradition, a person's strength spoke louder than their story, and the women had proven themselves. That evening, the 5 of them sat around the fire together. No secrets, no masks, just truth, shared in glances and quiet words. Clara leaned against Maribel, her fever completely gone now. She had chosen not to confront Caleb with violence, though her hands had shaken when she first saw him, but in that moment, she had chosen to live for herself, not for revenge. Anna, holding her mother's letters, read them aloud for the first time. The gentle words reminded them all of family, of home, and of how even the smallest threads of love can keep someone from unraveling. Naomi admitted she planned to turn herself in when spring came. "I don't know what kind of justice is waiting," she said. "But I'd rather face it now than keep running forever." "No matter what happens," Ruth said, "we face it together." Ruth herself had begun helping with the Lakota hunting parties, her aim true, her instincts sharp. For the first time in years, she was using her strength not just to survive but to belong. As for Maribel, she finally took the locket and buried it under the tall pine tree at the edge of the stream. Not to forget her past but to honor it, she whispered, "I forgive you, Thomas, and I hope you forgive me." Chaitan stood beside her, silent for a while. Then he spoke. "You carry pain like stone in your chest, but you are not made of stone." She turned to him, eyes glistening. "You knew, didn't you? From the beginning." He nodded. "I saw it in your eyes. All of you. You were not just lost, you were searching." They walked back to the fire as snow began to fall again, soft this time, like a promise rather than a threat. That night, the Lakota sang songs of renewal and survival. The drums echoed through the valley, and the 5 women joined them, dancing beneath the stars. Wrapped in borrowed shawls and new hope. When spring came, they had choices to make. Clara chose to stay with the Lakota for a while, learning the language, the land, and herself. Anna returned to a distant town with a new name and a letter for the newspaper, telling her story so that no other girl like her would be silenced again. Naomi made good on her word, turning herself in with Ruth by her side, as witness and support. Her courage impressed the judge, and the truth of what she'd endured softened the punishment. Ruth, after escorting Naomi, returned to the valley to live among the Lakota as a hunter and protector. And Maribel, she returned one last time to the ruins of her old home. It was overgrown now, nature reclaiming what fire had taken. She placed a stone with Lily's name carved into it beneath a wildflower bush and whispered goodbye. Then she rode west, toward the edge of the map, where she would open a small schoolhouse welcoming the lost, the broken, and the brave. Because now she understood. Survival is not just living through something, it's becoming someone new on the other side of it.